Okay, so at this point, you should have already completed the 5.2 worksheet number 28. You should have already submitted that on Schoology. If you didn't, make sure you do that first. Now, we are going to move into the 5.3 notes. Get your binders open up to the 5.3 notes, which is factoring quadratic equations, day 2. Sorry, my dog decided to come up here and say hi. All right, so last class, right, we visited factoring quadratic equations. Right, I'll just show example 4 for the moment so that you can kind of see it. Right, and you were just working on that with the worksheet that you were working on. The key is also up if you wanted to check your work with that. When we want to factor quadratic functions, right, we find what two numbers, in this case negative 10 and 1, are going to add to become b, right? What two numbers are going to add to become that b term, right? We have a way to do that. We do not have to use the box to group. Instead, what we are going to do is we are going to split the middle and factor by grouping. Today, we are just adding one layer to that. All we are adding is that some expressions, some functions, are going to have a GCF, greatest common factor. That greatest common factor needs to be factored before we factor the trinomial. We're going to see what that looks like. You can kind of avoid this picture up here. It's kind of a mess of a picture. Example 1 asks us to factor the following expression completely. Our expression is w to the third power minus 10w squared plus 25w. One thing that we need to do first is look for a greatest common factor. In this case, w to the third power, negative 10w squared, and 25w, right? I say w in all three terms. My greatest common factor is going to be w. I am able to take a w or divide a w out of all three of those terms, right? W to the third power divided by w is w squared. Negative 10 w squared divided by w is negative 10w, so on and so forth. Now, this w that was our greatest common factor is just going to kind of hang on the outside and tag along the entire way. But look at what we have on the inside of the parentheses now. We have a trinomial. There's no longer a GCF. We have an a value, a b value, and a c value. So what we do, complete the x, right? That top number is a times c. A in this case is 1. So 1 times 25, which is just 25. The bottom number is b, which is negative 10. Negative 10. What we are looking to find now are two numbers that are going to multiply to positive 25 and sum to negative 10. Take a second to think about what these two numbers are going to be. Pause the video if you need to. Should have negative 5 and negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Negative 5 minus negative 5 is, negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. So now we can rewrite our expression, right? We're going to rewrite that expression now using negative 5 and negative 5 instead of a negative 10. So we have w, right? Again, that w is just going to tack on. Right, here it was before. We still keep it. Then we have w squared, right? Our a stays the same. Instead of having b, which was negative 10, we now have two numbers that are going to add to B, negative 5W and negative 5W. And our C stays the same with 25. Up until this point, the only thing that we've added so far is just we had to factor the GCF out first, and now it's just kind of hanging out on the outside. Now, where are we going to go from here? We're going to skip over that box, and we're going to split the middle. Split that equation right down the middle. Again, see how that W just kind of stays there. Don't lose it. It's just going to stay there. Split the middle. If I'm just looking at W squared minus 5W, what am I able to factor out of both of those? I'm able to factor out a W. So just looking at W squared minus 5W, I'm able to take out a W. And what am I left with? W minus 5. Then I look at negative 5W plus 25. What am I able to take out? A negative 5. Right? Our goal is for these to match up. In this case, they do. If we didn't take out a negative 5 and instead just took out a 5, then these would not match up. Right? We need those to match up. So again, W is going to stay in front. The first product that we're going to have, right, is W and negative 5. And the second product that we have is W minus 5. So, right, when we group whatever we were able to factor out, which was W minus 5, and whatever we weren't able to factor out, which was W minus 5. And again, just a reminder, the only thing that changes between what we were doing in day 2 and now day 3, 5.3, is that we look for a GCF, we factor that GCF out, and it just stays with us the whole time. Moving on to problem B. First step always stays the same. Look for a greatest common factor. I want you to take a second to think about what the greatest common factor would be and how you would write that. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, in all of these terms, right, I have a negative 2x squared, a 14x, and a negative 24. I can't take out an x because my constant term doesn't have an x. But I have negative 2, 14, and negative 24. All of those numbers are divisible by negative 2. So I'm able to take a negative 2 out from all of those terms, and inside the parentheses I'm left with x squared minus 7x plus 12. I have my A, my B, and my C values. That negative 2 just hangs out in front, and it's going to continue to hang out in front. Now we move on to filling out the x. Top number, A times C. A in this case was 1. It's a 1x squared, so A is 1. C was 12. 1 times 12 is 12. Bottom number is B. B was negative 7. We had negative 7x. B is negative 7. Now we need to find two numbers that are going to multiply to 12 and add to negative 7. These two numbers are negative 3 and negative 4. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. And negative 3 plus negative 4 is negative 7. So now we re-express what we had, now using that negative 3 and negative 4. We have negative 2 times x squared minus 3x minus 4x plus 12. Our A stays the same, our C stays the same. But now we instead have two things that are going to add to b. Okay, you can guess where we go next. Split the middle. We split the middle of this expression. We look at the first group that we have, x squared minus 3x. What can I factor from both of these? Well, both of them have an x. I can at the very least take out an x. Looking at the second part, negative 4x plus 12. Remember, this starts with a negative number. I'm going to want to take that negative out. X squared minus 3x, I factor x. I'm left with x minus 3. Now on the other side, that should match when I factor a negative 4, and I'm left with x minus 3. When I group, first grouping I have is what I was able to factor out, x minus 4. Second grouping is what I had left, which was x minus 3. And again, the only change from last class to today is that negative 2 that we were able to factor out very early in the problem, right, just kind of hangs out, and it follows along the whole way. I would like you to take a second to look at C and try and figure out how to do this problem without just watching it. Pause this video if you need to. Okay. First things first, greatest common factor. Not all the terms have an x, so I can't take an x out of there. 3, negative 60. All of those numbers are divisible by 3. So I'm going to take that 3 right on out. 3x squared now just turns into x squared. Negative 3x just turns into negative x. And negative 60 divided by 3, negative 20. My a is 1, my b is negative 1, my c is negative 20. The top number in the x, moving on to the x now. Top number, a times c, 1 times negative 20, negative 20. Bottom number, b. B in this case was negative 1. Oops, negative 1. Now we're looking for two numbers that are going to multiply to negative 20 and add to negative 1. I understand that this one might be a bit tougher. You can list out all the factors of negative 20 if you want and see if that would help. 4 and negative 5. So now we re-express. Instead of having 3 times x squared minus x minus 20, we write 3 times x squared plus 4x minus 5x minus 20. Only change is that instead of having b, we have two numbers that add to b. Now, if you were trying this problem before, right, when I said to kind of take a pause and try this out, and you had negative 4 and positive 5, right, negative 4 and positive 5, that sums to 1, not negative 1 like we needed it to. Okay, you can guess where we're going from here. Split the middle. Split the middle of my equation. Then, I look at the first group, x squared plus 4x. What am I able to take out? An x. I look at my second group, negative 5x minus 20. What am I able to take out? A negative 5. So I have 3 times x plus 4 times negative 5 times x plus 4. So we see how x plus 4 and x plus 4 match up. Our two groups. What were we able to take out? X minus 5. What stayed in? X plus 4. So our final answer is 3 times x minus 5 times x plus 4. Now I know I mentioned it a handful of times, but these problems don't change that much. From right here all the way to the right, this is what we already have done. But what changes is now we first need to look for that greatest common factor. And just make sure that it hangs out the whole way. We had W, we had -2, we had a +3. Okay, great. Right now that you've completed this video, I want you to complete the 5.3 worksheet number 29. Make sure you submit that by the end of class today. And with any time you have remaining at the end of class, work on the 5.1 to 5.3 MyOpenMaths, any of the assignments that you don't already have done. See you all next class. Thanks.